Hello, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Today's show examines the ominous threat that modern-day eugenics and euthanasia pose to someone with a disability or a perceived disability. Why does mankind want to kill other members of society that supposedly have a disability or are unable to be productive members of society, or prenatally tested to be less than perfect, or perhaps just too old? Nowadays, why is it that old folks in the Netherlands don't want to go to the hospital for fear that they will be euthanized? Where did the eugenics-assisted suicide and euthanasia movement originate? How has it evolved? And what are the manifestations we are encountering in our modern-day society? Today's guest is co-director of the Institute for the Study of Disability and Bioethics. He's a recognized expert both nationally and internationally on disability issues. He appears regularly on radio and TV and writes about disability and bioethical issues in the print media. He consults on disability issues at the United Nations. He serves as a member of the International Euthanasia Prevention Council, and he's also a professor of special education at Regent University in Virginia. Today's show delves further into the broad mosaic of the Right to Life movement. I confidently believe you'll find today's show to be unique, informative, content-rich, truthful, and thought-provoking. Well, welcome, Dr. Mark Mosert.
Good evening, good afternoon, rather. Good to be with you.
Before we get started, Dr. Mosert, I just wanted to mention the call-in phone number. Should our viewing audience have any questions for our guest about disabilities and bioethics, the number is 617-708-3290. Well, Dr. Mosert, how and why did the modern-day eugenics and euthanasia movement get its start?
Well, we often think of it as being something that just popped up in the last 10 or 15 years, but this, of course, is not the case. Historically, many different cultures have looked at people who are different and desire to do them harm. But in terms of what we're going to talk about here today, we can really go back to the second half of the 1800s, 1860, 1870, around about there. And two very important things happened at that time that I would argue are still impacting us today. The first, of course, were the ideas of Charles Darwin. Darwin, as you know, was the guy who said some people will survive in societies and in cultures and others will not. And the ones who survive are the more desirable ones because they will be fitter, they will be better specimens of the species, if you will, and that was a desirable thing to do. And Darwin not only thought about that in terms of surviving as a species, the human species, but also had some people who believed in what he said and said, look, if we have people who have physical differences, we want the strongest to survive. But what about if they have behavioral differences? We know what we like, we know what behaviors we don't like, so maybe we can apply Darwinism to people who act differently or who are different in some way. So that was the one very important idea, that we started to judge people and their lives on some kind of scale, from very desirable all the way down to not so desirable. At the same time, there was also a rise in science of understanding that we could genetically manipulate things. For example, the famous priest Gregor Mendel found that he could breed sweet peas and predict what type and what color they were going to be to a very strong certainty. And so these two ideas of somehow using genes to manipulate things to perfection, plus the idea that some people were better than others, really started to take traction around about 1890 to 1900, where the general public became aware of these ideas and said, hey, look, we can actually take people we don't like and somehow genetically manipulate their quote-unquote breeding and come up with better people. And if we don't like the people we have around, let's find ways to basically get rid of them. So that's where we started, and that's how this seeped into the public consciousness, certainly by the 1920s or so in Europe and in the United States.
Well, let's talk about the 1920s, 1930s, the National Socialist Party in Germany, also known as the Nazi Party. They were really promoting this idea, and also, I believe, in Britain, weren't they promoting it also?
Well, this is where a lot of the genetics movement started, was, of course, in Great Britain, and that had migrated to the United States and was very popular, way ahead of Hitler coming to power. And what we do know is that Hitler was very interested in these ideas of better breeding, of controlling the population for the greater good, of looking for a more perfect set of human beings. He'd read all the popular scientific books and journals and understood this very well, and long before he came to power, decided that he was going to organize a state around this idea of human worth. What added to that was in 1920, two German authors, a college professor and a lawyer, wrote a very influential tract and coined for the first time a very chilling term that was used over and over again during Nazi Germany, and that was useless eaters and people whose lives were not worth living. And these two authors essentially said there are some people who are so badly off, who are so different, who are so disabled, that they really aren't people at all. Their lives are so bad, their outlooks are so poor, that it would be better off if we just destroyed them. And so that germinal thought in the mid-30s meant that the Nazis decided to experiment on getting rid of people in large numbers, and they turned to their own German population, to Germans with disabilities, who were conveniently, of course, at that time housed in many institutions across Germany. And so they began to experiment on ways to kill people with disabilities and eventually perfected the gas chamber. And what many people do not know is that the gas chamber was perfected as a killing instrument, as a mass killing instrument on German citizens with disabilities, and then was transferred in the late 30s into the death camps, which resulted in the Holocaust.
I see. I think you had mentioned the Nauer child,
Yes.
and then expanding it into adults. What was her problem that she had?
Well, essentially the Nauer child, and for many years we did think it was a her. We found out last year for the first time that it was actually a little boy by the name of Conrad. But the Nauer child was famous because that was the first example of the Nazis actually, as a state entity, basically okaying, agreeing, and going along with killing a child with a disability. The child was severely malformed, and the parents wrote to Hitler and said, look, this child is a terrible drag on the family. Our other kids are all fine. This child upsets the mother. We're all upset about it. This is just too much of a burden for us to bear. Will you please euthanize our child? And the Nazis basically said, look, this is a fantastic opportunity for us to put into practice what we've been thinking about doing all along. And so Hitler's medical team, his senior medical team, sent a doctor down to the hospital at the University of Leipzig where the child was and euthanized the child. And that was the first time that as a state-sanctioned policy in Germany that someone with a disability was euthanized as decreed by the state. And then, of course, many others soon followed. The Nazis also had a massive propaganda program in theaters and on film and so on, telling people, look, these people are so different, people with disabilities, people who look different, who maybe act differently because of their disability. These people should be killed. And so we found by the late 1930s that the German public pretty much was going along with that idea, and the government was inundated with parents who were saying, my child is malformed, my child has a disability, please would you come and take the child off our hands, and please would you euthanize this child. So a very strong cultural response to disability, and certainly not in the best interests of those who were different.
Wasn't there any protest by the German citizens about this?
Well, not really.
Oh.
Unfortunately, and many people have tried to read many things into that. But essentially, it was the spirit of the age. The age was convinced that these new scientific developments in genetics and Darwin's ideas of survival of the fittest were the cutting edge of the new scientific age, and that if people said this was the thing to do, then it must be true, it must be good.